We're in the ninth generation of gaming. Fidelity is at its absolute peak, stories are more sophisticated than cinema,
My freaking mind!
and attention to detail is better than it's ever been. But there's one part of game development that studios seem to have left behind, and that's Ragdoll physics. Ragdoll physics became the norm in 3D games around the 7th generation of consoles. And since then, we've seen a lot of games get creative with ragdolls, accounting for things like weight and environmental interactivity. But there's one game out of the bunch that, even through all this time, is still better than anything we've ever seen. And that's Red Dead Redemption, baby. Now, I'm sure you've all seen this video at some point or another if you're even remotely interested in Rockstar games. It was created prior to the release of Backbreaker, a football game for the PS3 that was essentially a stress test for Euphoria. Backbreaker, The Force Unleashed, and every Rockstar game after GTA 4 all share this software. Most ragdoll systems use a simple bone structure on the character models, so that way when a character dies and they plop down, they'll react in a way that the bone structure allows it to. But there's no reaction from the player, so when they do die, they just kind of flop down in the way that a human would flop down. Now, Euphoria programs in a nervous system to these NPCs, along with the bone structure. So when something happens to a character, they actually react. To put it simply, ragdolls make NPCs limp, Euphoria adds intelligent reactions. Now, where Red Dead stands apart from the rest of the games that use Euphoria is how it's applied to the characters and interacts with the world itself. In short, Red Dead Redemption has the greatest ragdoll system ever created. And here's why. Red Dead Redemption has some of the most unique and stylized ragdoll physics I've ever seen in a video game. Its exaggerated limb movements and overselling of glorious shootout deaths, as well as the overall tone and themes of the franchise itself, are heavily inspired by spaghetti westerns. Red Dead Redemption takes GTA 4's grounded and more serious, realistic approach to Euphoria and tweaks it to emulate the style of spaghetti westerns. The calling card of spaghetti westerns is the violence on display and how over-exaggerated it is. Arms flailing everywhere, bodies are needlessly spinning around, people stumble feet away from where they were originally shot at. See, spaghetti westerns walked a fine line between being very gritty and very bloody, while also being completely absurd and over-exaggerated. These films lent themselves to the mythos of the Wild West being this grandiose time of fantastical violence and pistol-spinning gunslingers. But looking deeper into the films, you'll find that the conditions are harsh, the characters are brutal, and the killings aren't always of just cause. The juxtaposition of absurdity and groundedness is the heart and soul of spaghetti westerns, and its influence on Red Dead is palpable. Getting into ridiculously unrealistic gunfights and laughing at the enemy you just shot tumble down a flight of stairs is contrasted with the game's theme of seeing all the violence and killing is deplorable, and if a man can truly redeem himself after living a life of such violence. You want to blow NPCs up with dynamite, you want to push them in a river, you want to shoot them in the head and watch them stumble, because it's really fun. It's funny to see. But all throughout the game, you're reminded that it's dishonorable and goes against the code that John Marston follows on his path towards redemption. It may be considered narrative dissonance, but in the context of the world and the art direction, it just works. See, the Euphoria system in Red Dead to me is so satisfying because it's made with laser-sharp artistic direction. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and it makes you feel exactly like you were transported into a 60s Western movie. The ridiculousness of the ragdoll physics, contrasted with the bleak tone of the game's narrative, really tiptoes the line between grit and camp, just as spaghetti westerns of the 60s did. You're so immersed into the world of a spaghetti western that when you get into a gunfight, you don't just hope to get cool ragdolls and kills like that, you expect it to happen. You know you're going in for a fight with people clenching their wounds, people spinning around after they get shot, people tripping on their own feet after they get shot. That is the beauty of Euphoria and Red Dead. It's not just a ragdoll system, it's an interaction with the game's environment that gets you immersed into a world of an old western about the last gunslinger in the West. Now look, I spent way too many hours shooting very innocent civilians that did absolutely nothing wrong, okay? Spent hours doing it for analyzation, scientific purposes, okay? And I noticed something while I was doing that. No reaction is ever the same between two characters. You'll get a similar type of reaction between two characters, but they'll never fall the same They'll never clinch the wound in the exact same spot. They'll always react differently. After hours of making John Marston do just the most heinous, unspeakable things you could think of, like pushing, shooting, stabbing, lassoing, trampling, set on fire, it made me realize how intelligent the AI really is in this game. Every animation is created on the fly and is dynamic to what's happening to them and where they are in the environment. Euphoria is always working when a ragdoll is taking place, but you're not always going to get a notable reaction. Now, out of all the time I've spent testing all these reactions, these are the ones I've noticed the most using various attacks and weapons in the game. When using a low caliber revolver or pistol, you tend to get the most cinematic reactions out of NPCs. Most of the time when you shoot someone with the caliber revolver, they'll grab onto where they've been shot at and stumble around for a second. Shooting them in the head will cause them to stumble to the ground most of the time, and they'll rarely just flop to the ground. If they do, they'll writhe around for a second before going limp. Shooting an NPC in the back with a low caliber gun causes them to tense up and reel their arms in. On rare occasions, they'll grab their face after a shot to the head, which is unrealistic but a personal favorite of mine. Shooting an NPC in the stomach will almost always cause them to clinch and fall forward. They'll crawl around on the ground and cling for their life. When using a repeater or a rifle, you tend to get the most exaggerated reactions from NPCs, but up close it's a 50-50 chance you'll get a reaction or just a limp death. A shot to the shoulder will usually make them spin around, which is ripped straight from Sergio Leone's playbook and never gets old. Shooting them in the face doesn't seem to get much of a reaction, as it just flop, but I found shooting them on the side of the head will get them to stumble a lot. Sniper rifles also tend to have very visceral reactions, as NPCs tend to clinch where they were shot and fall sideways. Shotguns are where you'll see the least amount of staggering from NPCs, since the weapons are so powerful up close. A shotgun blast to the face will always cause the NPC to be blown backwards and violently fall to the ground, causing their arms to shoot up in the air. A gut shot with the shotgun usually causes them to be blown back a couple feet, spun around if shot in the shoulder, or tripped over if shot in the foot. The best way to see Euphoria in action when using a shotgun is to shoot from far away. Still, even without having much of a reaction, it's still fun to see how fragile NPCs are as they're blown back feet away from a shotgun blast. No matter what an NPC is hit with, if they're still alive and fall to the ground, they'll almost always try to catch themselves or keep their muscles clenched to brace for impact. Some NPCs will gather themselves and use their arms to maintain posture while still on the ground. When an NPC dies, you can see their muscles release. When an NPC is falling to the ground and not shot or about to die, they'll cover their head with their arms and hunch over, all procedurally animated by Euphoria. Red Dead stands out as a testament to how deep a ragdoll physics system can be. It's certainly not the most realistic experience in the world, but it's definitely the most fun and the most entertaining. How many other games can say that you can have fun just watching characters fall down on the ground for hours on end? Most games that make use of ragdoll physics around this time, such as Saints Row 3, Skyrim, Uncharted 3, all pale in comparison to what Rockstar was pulling off with Euphoria, in 2010 no less. So that might lead you to the question, hey, if Euphoria is so good, why didn't anyone use it anymore? Why is it just Red Dead? Well, 3 reasons, you fucking idiot. 1. So Natural Motion ended their licensing of Euphoria in 2017. There was a rumor that some random company bought out the license for Euphoria, and they're the ones licensing it now, but I can't find out who that company is. I have no idea who it is. So it's effectively dead, and there's no way to license it anymore. So that's the first reason, is that it's unobtainable. Number 2, it's really fucking hard to implement into your game. Now Euphoria, it's not a full physics engine. The physics engine itself is Endorphin. Euphoria is a way to add the nervous system into NPCs. So if you're not using the Endorphin, you have to implement the Euphoria tool into your physics system that you're using. And really no one knows how to do this except Natural Motion employees and the people that created Euphoria themselves. So if you were to implement Euphoria into a game, you would basically have to hire a whole team of Natural Motion contractors to implement it in the game for you. And number 3, when licensing Natural Motion, it's really fucking expensive. Some companies claiming to be upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars just to implement it. You have to basically hire a whole new development branch just to have Euphoria worked on your game. Hiring a whole new development branch just to have NPCs falling down but cooler isn't exactly the most sound financial decision by a company. So while good ragdoll physics can greatly enhance the game's experience, it just doesn't make sense for developers financially and from a labor standpoint to implement Euphoria. Neither is it possible nowadays anyway. But this works in Rockstar's favor. Euphoria is such a complicated and obscure software to use that no one even attempts to try and use it. Except for Rockstar, who's intrinsically tied it into their game's engine. And not only do they use it, but they use it so well that it's ubiquitous with the brand's identity as a whole. GTA 4, Red Dead 1 and 2, Max Payne 3, GTA 5... Well, not you. You can't imagine playing these games without Euphoria. Since killing is the main mechanic of the game, you're seeing the program play out more than half of the playing time, which over time makes it take it for granted, but if it wasn't there, you'd notice, and it would definitely diminish the experience. Out of all the Ragdoll systems in the game industry, Red Dead truly does stand out as having the most stylized, thoroughly programmed, and mechanically sound Ragdoll physics of all time.